This episode is being brought to you in part by Real-Time CTMS, a leading provider of innovative software solutions for clinical trial research sites, site networks, sponsors, and CROs. Real-time systems allow users to manage complex clinical research processes with powerful user-friendly interfaces that are revolutionizing how research gets done. To get a free demo, check out the company's website at realtime-ctms.com, complete one of their contact forms. Hello and welcome to the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. I'm your host, Brad Hightower. I just want to do a little bit of house cleaning before we get into this week's episode. Guys, please check out our weekly live streams. They stream on LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm trying to slowly grow out some video content on YouTube, so if you'd be so kind, go check out Note to File podcast on YouTube and subscribe. I'm up to a whopping 30 subscribers, so any support would be greatly appreciated. Also, make sure to check out saveoursites.com for the upcoming Save Our Sites conference in February of 2024. You're going to see a lot of content about that over the next several months. We're really excited. We've already got a lot of interest, a lot of sponsors, and we're really working hard to make sure it's a valuable conference for sites and not just another, money grab of a conference. So make sure and check that out, saveoursites.com. All right, our guest this week is Amy Fox. Amy's a leader with experience in clinical trial program operations and regulatory compliance. As a results-driven professional, she's proven ability to oversee program processes, project management, quality improvement, and timely execution of clinical trials. She's knowledgeable in academic and large healthcare settings, as well as public health and private physician practices. Her areas of expertise focus on early phase human pharmaceutical clinical research in the specialties of pediatrics, oncology, neurology, cardiology, infectious disease, dermatology, and diabetes. This week, we discussed the increasing complexity of clinical trial operations, connecting SOPs to processes, and the difference between QC and QA. So without further ado, Amy Fox. All right, today we have on Amy Fox. Amy, thanks so much for getting on with us today.
My pleasure.
Where are you located?
I am in Kansas City, Missouri side.
Nice. See, it's February 1st. I know this will come out a little bit later, but did you guys get any of the ice that kind of ran through the middle of the country here?
Not what's currently going through, so I'm going to say that we want that to continue. We'd be fine without it. We have a little sun, a little 38 degrees today.
I'm jealous. Yeah, we've been in the, in the 20s and teens the last couple of days here in Oklahoma City. I know Texas has gotten it pretty bad too, some of North and Central Texas. So I guess you guys still lucky for now, knock on wood.
It'll divert to the other side of the state.
Well, I'm sure you'll take it. Well, very good. I want to start out like we do, with all of our guests. I'm always kind of interested to hear about people's backstories, how they got into the clinical trial space. I think it's, a lot of cool and sort of diverse stories. So if you would, tell us about your history and kind of what brought you to the industry.
Well, I originally went to school in the public health space. And so luckily had some adventures, I guess, that led up to my first job in research. I actually became a research coordinator for a cardiovascular group here in Kansas City, a very large group. And Dr. James O'Keefe was my lead PI, and then Dr. Richard Moe. They did lipid research, and Dr. Moe was actually interested in cardiovascular disease and diabetes. He knew that diabetics presented different. He just needed the science to show it. Now we know a whole lot. And then Dr. O'Keefe actually ended up patenting and putting on the market a very good fish oil. So I got to be a part of, that. I got to be a part of bringing Lipitor to the market. That was a huge blockbuster back in the day. I'm really dating myself here. And, so of course, when I went into research, I thought, well, this is easy. Every drug gets to the market, right? Because I saw so much success with them, but we all know that's not true. There's a lot of failure. But yeah, that's how I got into it. And I had really, really top-notch people around me that lifted me up and pushed me and educated me. I mean, I think back just even about the little pieces they taught me along the way, the good things and the professionalism and the dialogue and, how I worked with my CRAs, and it was really, it got me on the right path, just love what I do and stuck with it for almost 25 years now.
Nice. So yeah, you started on the site side. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I think I always love to hear that. I think that's not always, it's not always easy to sort of get that perspective without living it a little bit. Although now it sounds like you're on the dark side now, right? The way a lot of site people may see it.
Sometimes I feel like I'm teetering between the light and the dark. I was a study coordinator for, I don't know, a decade. And I did a lot of the site, as you said, a smaller site perspective, and then moved into academic medicine, had some experience with CROs, and went into management. And now I'm an auditor. So now I kind of sit at the table and look at everyone's perspective on a study. And it's really unique to see how it moves along the continuum. Everybody's opinion matters and everybody's activities matter. The details get lost quite a bit occasionally because the sponsor's focusing on trying to balance many sites, many vendors, all their data, and the timelines, the big timeline of when do we get to go to the FDA. The CROs trying to keep mom and dad happy, The vendor situation is outrageous. How many vendors we actually now interact with at every level, between the technology, between the procedures we do, between just like what we're doing today, podcasts and Teams meetings and Outlook and, then archiving it all somehow, right? To make sure that 20 years from now, we'll be able to retrieve it. So, and then the poor sites, right? Just balancing all that they do, whether it's a hybrid clinic, running a regular routine service line and then trying to add research into it, that really can be great because they see that integration. And when they do it right, it's beautiful. But again, we're dealing with humans and we're not cars on a manufacturing plant, and we take more time than we thought. And we break down differently than a car. We don't just get a replacement part and fix us. And we have different reactions for some reason, right? Because we're all built different. We're not built like the same automobile going down the line in front of us. And the trials have gotten a lot more complex. Just the types of data we're collecting is so much more detailed. The genetic component has revolutionized how we even address the projects we do. I started out, we did some blood draws. That was it. Now we're signing multiple consents so we can not only get their DNA, but then we can analyze it, but then we can strip it down to a particle that can be stored in a check-in, check-out database at some national level. It's mind-blowing the way we think about what we do.
Yeah, it's we talked about this a little bit even before. It's chaotic at the site level. It's complex. It's intricate. One thing you mentioned that I kind of jumped onto there is all the new vendors and things that are being integrated into these trials. Does that make auditing more challenging? Certainly that must add a layer of complexity to what you guys do as well.
It absolutely does. You have the central labs and the local labs. But even within just say one oncology study, they could have 3 or 4 central, quote unquote, central labs, and they could have a couple of local labs because you don't send normal oncology like solids and blocks. You don't just send them off your regular Quest lab. There might be a specialty area where those are housed. Then just throw in the extra equipment they have to even do the work. You've got the different MRIs, the different CTs, PET scans, X-rays, not even to mention how they're going to provide the IP, whether that's oral or infused. So when you just start to look at all the vendors. And, as an auditor, we're going in to look at specific things. Like if I come to your site, you're going to know why I'm there and what I'm going to be looking at. I have a, specific area. Like, am I looking at you and what your site is providing? Did you do the safety and efficacy correctly on your subjects? Were they enrolled correctly? All those pieces. But then I'm also looking at, what did your CRA do? Did they help facilitate if something was missed? Was there a retraining? Did they document deviations? Were queries answered? And did they help you? Sometimes those queries come back and it's questionable. Like, I could answer this 3 ways. So, what are we really looking for without guiding you to answer it the way they want you to answer it? And it does get complex. And then there's, the piece of the sponsor is ultimately responsible for how it's carried out. Did the amendments come out correctly? Did the vendors act correctly? Did they send the right lab instructions with the lab kit? Did they even get the right lab kits to the site? And then again, who is responsible for ensuring that occurred? Was that delegated from the sponsor down to the CRO? Did the CRO then delegate it to a vendor? And then you've got the PI that gets caught in the middle because he's ultimately responsible for all of it, all the pieces. So you can sit and point fingers, but then here I am going, well, but you still didn't get the lab kit done.
Right. Well,
you still didn't get the result. Now what?
To your point, I think this maybe jumps us closer to what we wanted to talk about today. But as a site, you're kind of balancing collaboration and partnership with, your CRA or the CRO more broadly, or even the sponsor and all of your vendors. But at the same time, the PI is going to be the one who gets black mark if they don't execute properly. So sites, to some degree, have to protect themselves, right? Have to ensure that, yes, we want to play nice, but we can't always take and trust the sponsor and CRO, however well-meaning they may be. They may not always be giving the site the best information or executing in a way that makes it easy and clear for sites. So, what can sites do to ensure that they're going to be as audit ready and as sort of tightened up as they can possibly be?
I think there's a couple of answers. We're all playing on the same team. It's not an us versus them. The sponsor hired the site because they either have had a past history of great execution, or they know the science, they have the expertise. There's a reason the site, through those feasibility questionnaires, were brought on. So there's not even a question that I trust that this, physician knows what he's doing, or that the coordinator is skilled enough because they've been vetted. Now, I know we've all seen situations where that might not have completely happened correctly, but, a majority of the time, the sponsors and the CROs are vetting good sites because you want deliverables. You want the patient population. You want, everything to go well and go timely, and that the site has the resources. They've done the investment of the equipment, or educating their team, or having the extra staff member, that went to an extra training, that learned how to do something special, right? But then there's the second piece of just the operational process. It's kind of the quality assurance moves versus the quality control versus what I do is the actual auditing, like the external coming in and getting validation. So those sometimes get sucked together into one little vortex and are interchanged. And they're actually very independent processes that if, maybe we had more, well, everybody always wants more time, but more elevation to talk about. Quality assurance is we check to make sure we had those things. You get the lab kits, the CRO and the lab think that's what was supposed to happen, right? You were supposed to get certain kit. And I've seen the simplest example. Your site is initiated and all of a sudden, you get the Christmas presents coming in, right? You get your EKG machine, you get all these lab kits, but you get lab kits for the entire study, but the study's probably going to run 2 or 3 years because it's a phase 3. So half of those kits are going to expire. And I think those were some of the things that have resolved. It's waste of money and space, but also just a waste of time and energy and resources that could be pushed elsewhere. So just those kind of things, like a quality assurance, I got these kits. They're all marked. You have a monthly maybe check off that someone is responsible for in your staff. Are all the kits current? Because you have to resupply. Do you have EKG paper, or did that EKG model go out of existence and now all of a sudden you got to do something?
Right.
Just those simple things, right? Quality assurance on did the data and the source get in? Do we still have outstanding queries, and who's addressing them? It's those simple checks and balances between partners, whether that's the site, whether it's a CRO, whether it's me as a study coordinator reaching out to my CRA because they were just there and they were supposed to follow up on something so you could finish a kappa, or I don't know, whatever issues going on, safety reports, IRB. We're all checks and balances on each other. So that's QA. QC is kind of the next more structured level, the more tangible, independent, where you shouldn't check your own work. Like if you say you do an informed consent, but you need to have an independent buddy or your admin or another coordinator double check. Do you have all 20 pages? Did you execute it right? Especially if you're doing maybe 3 or 4 subjects right in a row. So that quality, like it wasn't just, you have 20 pages. It's you did it right. You followed the processes that are in place. You did your note. You scanned it into the ETMF. The IRB got the pages they were supposed to have, like all those pieces. And it's literally like you've got someone behind you going, yep, did it right. High five. Great job. Or, oh my God, you forgot. Page 19 is not there. Oh, you got to scan it again. Or the IRB says they never got it. Well, I scanned it to you. I have a read receipt. Yeah, we didn't get it. Okay, well, we'll do it again, right? It's just those things that can so quickly, when the big bad people like me come in as the auditor, or God forbid, the FDA, a for cause comes in, or you're a high enroller. And so the FDA is coming to see you because you're a high enroller and they want to make sure that is not biased. Those are the people that are like, we want to make it sure that all these things are right for the masses. We're looking at the whole process. We're not just looking at what that 20-page ICF did. We're looking at, you did the ICF, the investigator made sure the inclusion-exclusion was correct and the history was right. The IRB approval was correct and you actually used the right version of the ICF. So we're looking at all the bigger pieces and parts, because the worst thing that, like, if I was coming in and doing an audit at your site, the worst thing would be that that subject became invaluable, or that the whole site could not be utilized for whatever reason because of a kappa that happened, or, worse, some kind of, or a 483 gets issued by the FDA. Like, no one wants any of those things to happen. So, I look at it like I'm still a link in the chain. And hopefully, in my role, I'm able to help facilitate dialogue between all the parties. That's what we were talking about way at the beginning of the podcast. Like my reports go back to certain parties, and then they look at, is it systemic, or was it just an isolated issue? And in all of those steps, whether it's QA, QC, or auditing, it should be looked at as feedback, not punitive. The punitive part comes when something really bad happens, right?
Yeah, you got real problems.
Yeah. You kind of look at it as a close miss. That's kind of how I have always done it. When I started out as a coordinator, there were things I had no idea what to do. But you grow up in the industry, and even as things change, you're still learning it again.
Yeah, that's true. And we talked about it before recording a little bit, that, there can be a sense of fear, and especially newer coordinators, in discussing these things as they come up, because, to your point, you don't want to get in trouble. You don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing. And that can be, scary sometimes. I think obviously the alternative is worse, which is to keep making the same mistake over and over again.
Right.
But, if we can continue to sort of create an environment where, it's okay to talk about, because it's not, like you said, it's not punitive. It's supposed to be for the good of us all, right? What are we doing wrong here, and how can we fix it? How can we ensure that we're not making the same mistakes over and over again? And do you feel like that's something that's improved, do you think, over the years? Or do you think there's still a little bit of taboo in somebody openly discussing some of these things?
Honestly, I think things have really improved. It probably doesn't feel like it to certain people, where we're still banging our heads against the same problems. Like even if I step back, say to Pharma Code 2000, right? It's kind of funny to think about. We used to go to these elaborate investigator meetings. I don't know if anybody on the recording will remember, I can remember going to, like, oh, we were so excited to have an investigator meeting. We got to go to Arizona and
Right.
go to the Biltmore. And, like you just kind of think about some of those days. And then you're like, and now I listen to a recorded WebEx.
Right.
But what's funny is I think back about that and I go, we hated being out of the office for 2 or 3 days because we kept thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to reschedule all this stuff. The physicians hated it because it usually impacted a call schedule or, there's always a family dynamic. There was something, right? So here we are, like, now we're listening to WebExes that take a couple of hours, say, and you can go back to them and listen to them again and again and again if you forgot, or there was a delay in getting your site enrolled or getting a first patient in so you could, or listen to it again because you're the new coordinator that took over for someone who left. I can recall those. So sometimes that's an improvement, right? But now, we go, well, we don't get to go to the Biltmore anymore. we can't have anything bigger than a pen.
Right.
We can't buy any coffee for anybody. There's some of those restrictions that have
Right.
come down the pipeline. So,
like to that point too, I mean, you do lose a little bit of that ability to interact with other people in a not necessarily so public, smaller group where you can feel maybe a little bit safer about asking some of these questions to your colleagues that, because, it still happens to me all the time. I mean, I've been working at the site level for, 15 years, but stuff comes up and I'm like, I'm not real sure about this. And then maybe you have a CRA who's saying, oh, no, this is a huge mistake that you made. You need to report this. And I'm like, I don't think so. Actually, I think we can do that. And then, it's nice to have that other perspectives to bounce off of because, a lot of times that stuff is not isolated to you, even though it feels like everything I see, I'm seeing.
It sure feels that way. Yeah.
I'm the only person who's ever had this question. Right. But because there's no real great place to go to really learn it all. Just, even time. Yes, you learn a lot over time. But even then, I think there's still things that come up that, again, I'm even like, what? Wait a minute. Are we sure about this? Who can I talk to about this? So, the investigators meetings, I'm with you. I mean, they're coming back. There have been some in-person investigators meetings at some destinations lately, but I love the ability, like you say, to be able to have that information at your fingertips when you need it. But I think you do lose a little bit of that personal touch of being able to actually drill down on some topics with colleagues,
If you've specialized, sometimes you see the same people over and over.
Right.
Which, there's kind of that over the years, you did start to see or talk to the same people. The physicians may have already had that network, either because they went to school together or, they see each other at professional meetings or, some specialty training where, the rest of us on the support part of it didn't always get that. So I don't know if you remember, they used to send out a list after the investigator meetings of who attended and they'd have contacts.
Sure.
You sometimes get those now and you sometimes don't, right? So I usually go out to clinicaltrials.gov and look up the study.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good strategy.
So I'll call people, be like, oh, I do know that person. And how are you doing this? Because
Sure. Yeah, no, I like that. That's, again, kind of probably pretty underutilized, even though fairly obvious. You can go there and generally find, site contacts. So no, I love that idea. Yeah.
And I know sometimes people get scared talking to the medical monitor. I don't want to call them, but that's why they're there. They're there to help out. They're hired to make sure that the clinical piece goes the way it's supposed to go, or calling the operations, the PM, they're all valuable. Absolutely. Is it nerve wracking? Yeah.
Yeah. You don't want to expose yourself too much, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's probably, historically where some of that's been, even in our regular business culture, it used to be that you kept things close to your chest because that meant you had the information, right? You held on to it. And so then you were a good resource. And we've kind of pivoted away from, share as much as share your failures. So I just think that dynamic has actually shifted in our business practices.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say I agree. I'd still love to see more. I mean, of course, nobody wants to just be airing their failures and difficulties all the time, but I think there's a lot we could learn from each other and not necessarily make the same mistakes over and over again. And, to go back to the QA QC, if you're a site, and especially now, I feel like there's two separate and distinct things going on the site level. One, you've got a lot of big site networks consolidating, but then you still have a lot of smaller, independent, sort of community-based research, whether it be integrated within a physician office or small standalone sites. How can they best implement QA and QC in their practices when these are maybe small, not a lot of people? Do you need it to be a separate person? Can it be just someone who's not on your study? Can they help QC your work? Or how would you recommend maybe sites start to pay better attention and better implement QA and QC?
So I think QA obviously is a little bit easier. You could probably have an entry-level person, your admins, your front desk, whoever's checking in people, even your CNA, if you have someone who maybe does just the vitals and rooms the subjects for you, or if you're in a hybrid clinic, everybody can be cross-trained to do some of those pieces. You have source, you have to be a little bit more diligent about, what they're actually checking. But those are people that are used to the details. Like, they're scheduling, they're making sure phone numbers are right. They're making sure addresses are right. In the days of, collecting paper, they were making sure, did the HIPAA document get done? Did the insurance card get copied? All those pieces that's their skill set. So why not utilize people in your office that are actually already really good at that? It's just shifting to, this is research and not a clinical person. And even your tablets or your electronic programs can be set up now, depending on, which kind you use and all those caveats. But yeah, the QA piece, like I used to be the only coordinator, but I had a couple of, CNAs and other people that did a lot of great work, and they were interested in what we were doing, and they knew they had that communication with the subject that maybe I had to jump, and go set up equipment. So I would have them looking at things, making photocopies or faxing or, any of those pieces they can be really supportive of. In terms of QC, that's clearly going to be a next level. I'm not saying that entry-level staff isn't good, but over time, they would grow those skills to be able to know, oh, yes, you were supposed to do this blood pressures before you do labs, or, you had to do a triple EKG, or you had to do sit, stand, lay down, blood pressures, whatever the piece is. You didn't do it. Get back over there. So that takes a little bit more knowledge. And then, of course, there's that delegation piece that, we want to make sure we always cover that they're on the trial, that they've had the proper training, so they're not just winging it. But again, it's a checks and balance on each other, and not just leaving it up to, well, I told them to do it. It didn't happen. Well, it's not my fault. Well, yeah, actually it kind of is, because you're responsible. You're part of that research team. So you still, somewhere in that process, there needed to be a double check. Kind of like going to the OR, everybody does the 10-second hold. Let's just make sure we all got it all together, and then we're going to go forward. It's the same kind of situation. Just double check. And it can save you so much time down the road. Because if you catch the one document that, say, page 19 of your ICF was missing, and it just happened to be the signature page, unknowingly, or a checkbox.
Right.
The IRBs are notorious for having the participant say yes or no on page 8 in the middle of this long...
Right in the middle. Right in the middle where you wouldn't find it.
Yeah. So it's like little things like that, but boy, those can become big things, because all of a sudden you're going to spend hours answering queries, fixing documents, contacting the subject, going back to the IRB, so.
Well, yeah. And, if you are, if you're enrolling a high volume trial, you don't want to make that mistake 25 times or 100 times before somebody discovers it because you weren't proactive in your approach.
Right. Absolutely. Couldn't say it better.
And that does happen, unfortunately. I mean, it's, but to your point, I don't think I am all, I've been guilty of this, of thinking like, okay, quality, it's got to be this like elaborate system and I've got to have extra people, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, right? I mean, it can be, to your point, and just using who is available to you. You know, obviously there's caveats to that, like as you pointed out, but you can make do with what you've got. The trouble that it saves you is going to be well worth the effort in the front end.
Yeah. And there's nothing like an entry level person that's just learned how to do something that finds their voice and says, "Excuse me, Dr. Hightower." There's nothing like it. It's great.
Right.
You know, because it builds their confidence and, you know, it keeps the team, everybody sees things from a different vantage point. And it's, you know, the study coordinators thinking about the entire visit and their heads in this space. They're like, I did 99% of it.
Right.
You just need that 1% to get over the goal. It's fantastic. I have relied on lab techs in my past. I have relied on admins that have just been, you know, my backbone, because you're just frazzled by the end of doing like a phase 1 12-hour, you're done. You know, you've been keeping tubes straight all day. You could care less, right? Whether the bed sheet got changed, but there's those people around you that are going to keep it all in line, you know, and if you have, I don't want to have checklists to have checklists, but you know, they're good reminders. Whatever makes your team operate is phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that can be a balance to strike, because your point, you don't end up with just, I got checklists for checklists to make sure I have more checklists. And that can add up. But I mean, I think another thing you pointed out that I really like is I think it can help provide more perspective for team members more quickly. You know, I mean, I've seen it everywhere I've been. It takes a really long time to train good coordinators. But oftentimes it's because they're so sort of specialized on their one thing that doesn't always carry over into other things. But if you've got teammates who are looking at each other's work, they're being exposed to different protocols, different, you know, vendors, different procedures, assessments, whatever the case may be. I think that's also going to help round out their understanding of the bigger picture, because again, sometimes that can be hard to see when you're especially a new coordinator. It takes a long time to see how all these little pieces fit together into the bigger picture. But, you know, again, you're exposing them to more and sooner. So I really love the sort of side effect I think that could have on, I don't want to say training, but at least exposure to the industry more broadly.
Oh, absolutely. And I love a new hire. They can be not just the asset, like, oh God, I filled an FTE, right? The relief.
Right.
But they're the best test of whether your processes work. Because we all start our job with, okay, here's a few thousand SOPs, right? read. And we all know that doesn't actually translate until they get up and do something with it. So are your SOPs, do they make them dangerous? Like they know enough to go out and go, I remember I'm supposed to do certain steps before I, you know, or I know I'm supposed to have an access before, or I remember something about that. Yeah. There was some IRB thing. I remember that. So do your SOPs funnel down into your processes? Do they funnel down into your education? Do they funnel down into mentoring the right staff at the right time in the right way? You know, there's people that naturally bubble up to all of those things. And then there's the holdouts, right? That'll be like, it was so much better the other way. Well,
Right.
That's fantastic. That's a great dialogue to have. You know, all of us can think of something. We all used to love our answer machines that sat at our house, except they weren't good until you got home.
Right.
And now we have voicemails on our phone that go with us all day. We still may not listen to them till we get home. But, you know, those advancements help us. And so that's why I love using the new people. And especially when you hire people that have come in with different, like as you were saying, different vantage points. And it's not we did it this way at my company and it was so much better. Right. It was, have you ever thought about, or hey, there's a new app, or this all-in-one printer does everything. You don't have to have 3 pieces of equipment. And I know you're looking to replace it. Just all of those elements are helpful.
Yeah. I mean, in a fresh perspective, I mean, I think that's it. I'm with you. I think that can be, and I mean, I'm surely guilty of that myself, is that doing things for so long in one way, only to, not have stood back and be like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the best way to do this. This isn't the smartest way, and we can really improve. So no, I mean, I love that. It's certainly a more broad topic, and
Oh
what kind
yeah.
of backgrounds are good. But I mean, that's interesting now too, though. I think we're starting to see a shift, a lot of new blood, I guess, for lack of a better word, coming into the clinical trial space, which, can certainly create some apprehension. But to your point, I tend to agree. I think it's going to also bring new perspectives that are going to continue to really change, how we do things. And frankly, I mean, it's not what we want. We wanted to get better at this, right?
Sure. Absolutely. And I mean, everybody wants things not just to be easier, but also to be done well, done with time efficiency, resource efficiency, financial efficiency. And no, everyone hates rework. Like, it's the vein of all of our existence, right? But to know that, I mean, I think most of us got into research because you saw that you were impacting the human condition in some way. Maybe we haven't met all the moonshot ideas, right?
Sure.
No, we haven't cured HIV/AIDS, which is one of my very first forays into healthcare. I mean, I can think of things where it's like, no, we haven't eradicated certain diseases, but wow, look at what we have done. And just in my lifetime, I think about what we've done compared to my parents or my grandparents who, my grandmother was born in 1900. To think of just about, I was never really into history, but that's kind of how I get into my history, is to think about what would she think about a cell phone?
Right.
What would she think about putting a patch on her shoulder to quit smoking? What would she think about, these scooters and I don't know, an Apple Watch, like, right?
Right.
And then I kind of think about, what am I going to be like when I'm 98, right? What am I going to be going, wow, I remember when I was on a Lipitor study. I remember when I when I thought it was so great that these big blockbusters came out. Or am I going to see cancer cured before I die? I mean,
Sure.
It's just mesmerizing, and I mean, having come through a pandemic, you can talk to people back, some of the real elderly people from 1914, 15, 16 that were in the original pandemic. That's pretty amazing.
Right.
I don't know. I think the more we know, the less we know, but also the more miraculous we become. I mean, that's why I get up every day. Yeah. Are there problems to fix? Yeah. Do I have to deliver bad news? Sometimes. But that bad news always turns into something great, because the potential for never repeating the error or finding a remedy to it so that we fix it. And so many other industries are impacting healthcare now because we're all purveyors of it, whether we work in it or we're clearly a user of it. We're really changing that human component, and it's bigger than us. It's bigger than, one little person doing it. That, again, we go back to the beginning of the podcast. We're all uniquely tied together. Yeah, we're hired by the sponsors, but the sponsors need us to do the work. We have the intelligence and the equipment and the umph and the interest to do it. So yeah, I think we're all working for the end goal. That's literally the same trophy.
Yep, it's true. We're all connected. We're all in it together. I have one more question I want to pick your brain about before we start winding down here. But right now, there's a lot of buzz around, decentralizing clinical trials, decentralized clinical trials, as I'm sure you're aware. In your experience, does, as we move away from sort of the immediate purview of the investigator, which, debatably is what DCT is doing, does it raise new QC or QA issues? Do you think that's something that's been well addressed or still needs possibly, some work at this point?
I think there's two answers to that. Yes and no.
Sure.
I think the concept of where we want to be, the eventual goal of a decentralized trial, will come. Certain indications right now, 2023, we can't wrap our heads around it,
Sure.
whether it's the infrastructure or the technology or the, where we can get to the subject the right way. We're just not networked well. But, as we've had other discussions, and blogs and, there are efforts, especially as we've seen coming through the pandemic, we pushed lightning speed to telehealth. Some of those technology platforms that we said, well, that's going to be 10 years. Well, here we are, right? Somehow we come together again and we make it happen. I was at a former employer. We were actually trying to set up a trial with a vendor. I have to keep all this anonymous and say it. But what they basically looked at was like a West Coast PI and an East Coast PI in the United States and how that would work. Now, the dialogue, of course, became right now in our current status, how do they have their medical licensures? Because the way we're structured doesn't allow them to have a medical license for the United States. It's just for their country or their state or their location or like DEA for a certain control, right? But as we've now seen the growth of some of these, I'm going to just say, companies that have gone to providing medications or behavioral therapy or even, dog food, like straight off the internet, we're blurring those lines. There is no California versus New York. So we're getting there, but we're having to bring what is right, what is wrong, what is in our current everyday thought process versus, like, remember when Al Gore said, this is the internet, and everybody went, wait, what? How does it's no place. The internet is a no place, right? It's not concrete. But now we talk about the internet like it's a chair in our living room. So while that trial was trying to get off and going, those were some of the logistics that the sponsor was working through. And, they couldn't have these investigators go get 20 or 30 medical licenses. It would have taken them 4 years, right? But that concept is logical. But then there's that other piece of not just their license, but do they have a relationship with the subject? And there's the argument there. Do they need to? For being in a clinical trial, do they need to? There's good arguments both ways, right? Because of continuity of care, because of history,
Sure.
because of side effects. So while I say decentralized trials, yeah, the dream and where we want to go and how we want to make it happen, technology can handle it. Probably our supply chain can handle it in terms of, like, we can get drug to people's homes, right? We have delivery, we have DoorDash, we have whatever, right? We have ways to communicate now without having to have someone drive 3 hours. We can do kind of like what we're doing today through a WebEx and do care with the telehealth. But there are certain indications that right now are just not working. It's really hard for dermatologists to see your skin well enough. Can they see a generic rash? Absolutely. But can they really see what they need to see up close? Not yet. Right. Not to say that those magnifying glass or pieces of equipment or pixels or whatever's going to get us there are not going to happen. It's going to happen. But we have to figure that out. Like, we have specialists around the universe that are calling in to consult on a live patient now. They run ORs that way, cut right here and drag there, right? So can it happen? Yep.
Right.
Is it going to be a straight line? No.
Right. Yeah. A fair point. I think it'll certainly be a curvy up and down line, I'm sure, but hopefully always moving up and to the right. Right. I mean, that's the hope. Well, very good. I appreciate that. I think it's I'm always interested in how these things all tie together. I know it's a big sort of topical thing right now, but where can people find you online? I'm
on LinkedIn. Amy R. Fox 1 is my handle, I guess. That's my only social media platform professionally. So
nice. I'll make sure that I'll post that up on the show notes so people can find you. And otherwise, anything else before we sign off?
No, this has been great. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. I appreciate the ability to, kind of share thoughts. I hope we've struck a chord with our audience, and that people will either reach out or become part of the conversation, come to you and volunteer to sit on a podcast. Thought it was going to be scary. It's not.
That's good. Hey man, that's all I'm trying to do is keep generating conversation. I think that's the key for us to all sort of, keep learning from each other. That's what I think we got to keep doing.
Oh, absolutely. And, I hope to retire someday, so I've got to hand off what we do and keep this stuff going. We got too much that still has to be solved, Yeah,
got to leave it in good hands.
We have to crack the diabetes code. We have to crack the cardiovascular code. There's lots still to accomplish.
Yeah, no question. Lots of work to do. Well, Amy, I really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
As always, thank you so much for listening to Note to File Podcast. Make sure to check us out at notetofilepodcast.com. Like, subscribe, leave a review, all those fun things. Check us out on YouTube and subscribe. I really appreciate the support of the community. Thanks, guys. Until next time.